Hi there, this is Joanne from TrueAuthenticPower.com from Tapping.me, and I'm also the creator of the program Catapulting to Confidence. I really wanted to do this audio today because I want to ask you a question. What have you lost that has caused you grief? When we say the word grief, a lot of people just think of someone dying or someone who's passed, and that is for sure one of the top grief sources. But there are so many others, and I don't think people realize that you go through a grief with some of the others. So I wanted to do an audio just to kind of give you some education of the energy behind grief and to let you know that a lot of feelings can be very confusing when you've lost something or when you're on edge of losing something. And I thought it was worthwhile to share some of this. So obviously, a death is going to be at the number one for most people when they think about grief. I want to dive into some other grief sources, though, because when you aren't aware of this, you may have a slew of feelings that you're not processing or even thinking that you need to process, and they're really running your life in a much bigger way than you might ever know. So what about if you've had some kind of tragedy like a fire or a loss of that kind? Water damage, something got damaged, something got ruined. That's a grief, and it needs to be processed oftentimes like you would a death. What if you had a lost job or an opportunity of some kind? What if you went for a position in another state or a different space or something that you wanted that you just didn't get? That can be a grief, and it can sit with you, and it can make you afraid of going for the next one if you have that rejection anchored in with grief. What about lost relationships? Some kind of opportunity for a relationship. Something was taken away in a relationship. And this isn't just about love relationships or romantic relationships. This can also be a change in a relationship within your family. That is actually a huge grief that I think a lot of people try to blow by or just say, oh, I don't need them, and just kind of write it off, when actually that can be a huge grief. We're all taught relationships should look a certain way. They should be a certain way, especially when it comes to family. And if you don't have that, you could be grieving being part of a family. If you were the one who was ousted or ostracized, or for whatever reason you have been separated, there is a grief that goes on there that maybe you need to address. What about the loss of putting in an offer on a house that you lost and you think that's the end all be all? I want to just say, when something falls through, a lot of times there's something better waiting, or it was a bad situation for you, but you may not be able to see that in the moment. And if you can't see that in the moment, probably you've got some grief and sadness about the situation, which is also normal. What about if you've lost a dream of some kind? Maybe being on the stage and the time has passed. Maybe having an opportunity in your career that you never got to experience, in your life that you never got to experience, someone you wanted to be with that you never got to be with, someone you wanted to love. You get the idea, something that you've lost. I bring this up because I think when people think of trauma, they have a certain knee-jerk reaction to, oh, that's big stuff, like over-the-top trauma, when actually everyday traumas can absolutely wrap you around its finger and you don't even know that you're stuck with those griefs and traumas. Grief is the same way as a trauma. It doesn't have to be so over the top where someone dies or is shot or is taken from you in some way, some custody kind of thing. It can be anything and everything that you're grieving where there's a loss. And I bring that up because I see so many people just trying to push through those things, push through as if they don't exist. Language that speaks, oh, I'll get over it, or it's no big deal, and they try to force pushing on. I want to bring this up because I had huge losses all in one pocket. And because I was experiencing so many firing storms of additional things, not just the loss of people, which would have been bad enough, but there were other things that I lost along the way. There were threats to me maybe losing my house, to maybe losing my car, to, family members that I lost, the family relationships that I lost. It's not just about when someone dies and you've changed the relationship with them because they're no longer here. A lot of times the family dynamics change. I know when my dad passed away and my mom was recovering from 5 bypasses the week that he died, I lost her too. Because not only was she in recovery and now she didn't really have a why do I need to recover? I've just lost my husband. The whole family dynamic changed. It wasn't just my father that I lost. And I bring this up so that you won't just blow by things. People are so quick to criticize the ugly cry. They're so quick to criticize, oh, get over it. And what they might be saying instead is, I can't deal with your emotion. So here's what I want to suggest to you instead. First of all, if you don't know tapping, I would suggest you learn tapping because it can absolutely help you through those horrific moments when nobody else might understand. And they don't really need to understand. This is about you. But if you are surrounded by people who don't understand your pain, you might seek out a grief support group. There is something called Grief Share that you might seek out that is in churches, I believe, predominantly. Maybe it's only in churches. You might look that up, griefshare.org, I think it is. You might do some tapping sessions because I remember working with a woman years ago, and she said, I grieve my mother every single day. I know I've probably mentioned this story on a different audio, but she grieved her mother every day for 10 years. She goes, there's not a day that goes by that my heart isn't just longing for her. From what she said at the time, we did, I think it was only 2 sessions, and she was able to see and feel differently to change the energy. Now, did she forget her mother? Absolutely not. But there are guilts and things that go with grief that when you shut them down or you don't acknowledge them, it's like festering a wound. And then it gets down under, and somewhere along the line, even years later, this happened to me. So I'm speaking from experience. I had so much devastation, so much loss, so many dynamics that were coming at me at the same time. It wasn't just people died. There were extenuating circumstances surrounding several things, and everything was in an uproar. I had so many emotions coming at me all at the same time that I didn't know what to do with all of them. And so at the time, in the moment, what did I do? They got stuffed underneath because I was fighting the next fire. Fast forward, though, it has affected me years later, and I kind of knew that was there, but now it was shoved down so deep because there were some horrific aspects of my Sweetheart Ray's journey that were over the top. I couldn't even go near them without some emotional help or coaching. And when those kind of things get stuck, trying to bring them up at a later date can sometimes be really difficult. You may need to work through a process that says, I don't want to go there. And you can do all that with tapping so that when you're ready, it's kind of a softer, you're kind of going in the back door instead of head on blazing. You know, if you lost a favorite article or someone took advantage of you, I mean, there are so many ways that you could be experiencing grief. It's not just the obvious. And that's why I wanted to do this. I hear people suffering all the time with what they try to blow off. Not just with this, not just with traumas, but with sadnesses, with fears, with anxieties, and they're trying to push through and force it. And that sometimes, not all the time, I suppose, but sometimes can make the situation even worse, can shove it down deep underneath. Now, I didn't consciously choose to look the other way. It was at the time the only way that I could cope, and I didn't realize the nuances that were beyond just the actual death, like the changes in my family, like the changes, it just changed everything. And some people never know to address those things. I do these audios so that you can have some insight about what might be hanging you up. When I hear people say, oh, tapping didn't work for me, you may not have gotten to the undercurrent or the underlying problem. And tapping doesn't, maybe it's not going to apply to you, or maybe it won't help you, but something else might. Maybe the awareness, changing the energy somehow will bring some soothing relief. I've worked with people in tragedies and traumas. I've worked with people who were in huge grief that couldn't get over it, and they did. It's not that you forget the person. It's that it doesn't hold that grip, that emptiness, that void. at such a level that you just don't feel like you can function or that you're in emotional pain all the time. In the case of the woman that I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, she said, I don't feel that grief. I'm relaying what she said. Does it always disappear in 2 sessions? Does it always have that dramatic an effect? Probably not. But for her, it did. And she had already suffered for a decade, feeling like she should. It's a big underlying reason why people keep their grief. Because if I love them enough, I should miss them for the rest of my life. When you change the energy on some of those things, I'm telling you, it can make a huge difference in your life. I hate to see people suffer, especially when I know there may be an avenue that could help. If this doesn't feel right for you, then find another way to change your energy, change your beliefs. But I would suggest to you that it is more likely than not that you could have some relief from whatever it is you're grieving. A missed opportunity is a huge thing. It's not on the level maybe of a death, but it is a death. So I would ask you, consider, what have you lost? What are you possibly grieving that you never put it into that grief category of sadness and hurt and pain? And my next question would be, what are you doing about it? Because you can stay that way for a very long time, decades upon decades. And I don't think you want to suffer like that, do you? I hope this helps. I hope it brings you some comfort. Share it with other people that you may know are grieving or in shock from a grief. You can subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of explanation kind of audios because when people don't understand why they're still hanging into a certain, why does this keep bothering me? Why can't I be free of this? It's because you may not understand all of what's attached. And when you understand that and then you do something about it, with a technique like EFT, calling a coach like myself, tuning into some membership audios and videos that can help you work through those emotions so that you can do it in private if you're a very private person. I know when I was working through my grief with Ray, I never wanted to do an in-person EFT session. I never wanted to be seen on Skype or Zoom. I wanted to do it in private over the phone with my own sense of I feel safe and I can do it this way because I needed to cry. I needed to explore all those feelings and not have somebody watching me. That might not be the way you need to do it, but I just want to tell you there are alternatives. You don't have to be seen. You can do it over the phone. You don't have to be in person, but you do have to work with someone that you feel understands, maybe someone who has been there. Because the other problem of how you can grieve is when you lose friends because they don't understand. I've seen that so much with these kind of situations. If they haven't been through it, it's hard to explain what it feels like. They may be trying to be comforting by pushing you to move on too soon, by suggesting this kind of and that kind of solution when it doesn't apply because you're so stuck and in a tizzy over what's just happened, you can't even think about moving on. People have the best of intentions, but that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that what they're trying to help in the way that they're trying to help doesn't hurt you even further. Again, if you know somebody that this can apply to or that might be comforted by hearing this, if you need to talk about would this apply to grief or whatever, you can always contact me. I hope it helps, and until our paths cross again next time, bye-bye for now.